father passed away in 2011, but he spent most of his adult life as a member of a 12-step organization and mentored hundreds and hundreds of guys over the years. And my brothers and I surprised my dad for his 35th sobriety anniversary. And I'd never been to a meeting like that before. And little cinder block building up in Bellingham. And as I was listening to people talk, it's kind of like when you were talking earlier, Killian. Every time someone stood up, I was like, "Oh my goodness!" It was like church times 100 in terms of the feeling of spirituality, the feeling of love, of support. Some people got up and said, "Haven't had a drink in 7 days," and people started clapping. And it made me see that community is probably as close to God as we'll get.
Mm,
Um, because that's what love is, right? It's
yes.
I'm not going to put conditions on whether I sit next to you and support you. I'm going to sit next to you and just love you. And I that really opened my eyes. That was a number of years ago, but now I get it.
Mm.
I get that community, and now I get why my dad was at so many meetings for so many years and stayed sober that way. And gave the gift that kept on giving for other people. I love that idea of just the power of that community. So,
Thank you
um,
for sharing that.
yeah,
I just one quick illustration of that. That we, one of our members received some really hard news and relapsed one day, and the very next day he was there on the front steps
hmm,
before we opened, waiting for the first person to get there to open the doors. And I remember asking him, because sometimes when someone relapses with a substance, it takes a little bit for them to find their way back.
hmm.
And so I was very curious, and I said, "Tell me, how is it that you made it back literally the very next day?" And I said, "Tell me about that." And he said, "Well, it's the first time in my life that someone cared whether I made it back."
Whoa, wow, oh, wow. That's like a mic drop moment. I mean, the power of not just accountability, like, "Hey, how's the drinking going?" But, "Hey, how are you? I didn't see you yesterday," or whatever. Wow, that's an amazing story. Killian, I saw your TEDx talk from a couple years ago, and that was a really interesting story that you told. I'd love for you to reshare how on a hike you were badly injured and it crystallized your entire life's work. And I thought that was such a beautiful story. Do you mind retelling that?
Well, I had, been a part of this Samaritan Inns work and then Recovery Cafe work for decades, and was on a hike and fell 30 feet and shattered my legs. And without skipping a beat, this gentleman scaled the rock face to the bottom of this pit that I had fallen into and scooped me up into his arms and then bench pressed me onto the rock about, 2 feet above us. And then he climbed up. And then again, he bench pressed me onto the next rock and he climbed up and again and again. And it just crystallized for me the fact that we are all falling in pits in various ways throughout our lives, and that none of us get out of those pits on our own, that we rely on those who are willing to crawl down into that pit with us and scoop us up and journey with us to the next place
Hmm.
where we can then um, do that for someone else. And it just crystallized how, I mean, it's a simple image, really, but it's really what this whole healing journey is about.
Yeah.
Uh, we're all at some, it, even at the same time, we are both reaching out to help heal another and receiving the healing that we need at the same time.
Wow. And where did that happen? You were overseas, right?
Yeah, it was in a rainforest in Indonesia.
Hmm. That's an amazing story. And it took you a while to recover, I take it, right?
It did.
Yeah. David, what is it about service that is such a key part of recovery when we help other people at the same time, as Killian said, at the same time that we need help?
Well, we all have gifts to share, but often I think sometimes we don't believe that about ourselves.
Hmm.
I think we're often each our own harshest critic, but recognizing that every one of us has a way to contribute and every one of us has agency to make the world better. And it's a way I think of getting out of yourself when you're part of helping others or helping. I mean, Recovery Cafe can't operate without its members. And many members have reported that that sense of being part of something and being counted on was an important part of that early recovery that often people who are struggling with substance use disorder and mental health challenges, there's shame and isolation and really kind of this brutal self-talk and breaking that and saying, no, you are worthy, your life matters, and you make a difference in the lives of others is just a powerful part of the model that Killian and the founder set up.
David, if you would talk also about, I don't think the average person, and I certainly count myself in that group of just average people, when we look at people who are unhoused in Seattle specifically, there's often an intersection of things that have happened in their lives that include trauma and substance use disorder and maybe mental illness as well. Because, um, I think if we're honest, people get broken, and then that leads to a lot of other things that sort of keep them broken. What do we need to know as sort of outsiders about what people on the streets? What do we need to know about them that we don't know right now?
Well, Mark, I'm gonna live with confidence that you'll cut this if it doesn't come out quite right. But
Okay.
I want us to be cautious about equating substance use disorder or mental health challenges with being unhoused. In some ways, I feel like that's our way of forgiving ourselves that we let people be on the streets. That like,
Mm,
well, that's because they're using drugs. That because otherwise, how can we live with ourselves that there's a tent right outside the door? And I mean, I'm
yeah.
not making up. There's a tent literally not far from where I'm sitting. And they did a really good study. West Virginia, if you go by opioids, West Virginia has a significantly higher substance use disorder issue than Seattle does. However, West Virginia does not have a housing issue. And if you
Mm,
look what rent is in West Virginia and what rent is in Seattle, the difference is astonishing. And,
wow.
and so the point of this study was that the reason we're looking at one of the major factors of people being unhoused in Seattle is because of the cost of housing.
Yeah.
And 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 another study was that for every I think it was $100 a month increase in rent. I can get you the exact fact, but $100 homelessness increased by 10%. So we have to be careful about grouping that all together because I do again think that's our way of forgiving ourselves that this is a reality in
Yeah.
our city,
Hmm.
particularly one of the wealthiest cities in the wealthiest country in the world. Um, uh, so that's it. I think absolutely trauma is a significant part of that, and I go back to what you said, Mark, that person is somebody's daughter, somebody's son, and that your point about making eye contact and reminding ourselves that that is somebody's kiddo. For me, that is how I try to keep it humanized. I think a lot of the dialogue has moved to this trying to dehumanize an other, um, and we and it yeah. So I think we've again seen that dignity in each person. I would say that I think supporting groups that are doing the outreach, that are welcoming people in, voting for policies that make sense, that are human focused and person centered. That's kind of the difference we can do. I wouldn't recommend um, for most people like trying to like go into the jungle and try to make. I think you're right. There is a lot going on there, and it's. I would rather support people who are doing that work, who know what they're doing.
Mhm.
But I would also say, one of the things that Killian said once that just I think about every day is, when we put our weight down with some sort of suffering in the world, however it is that we do it, if we're contributing our time, our talent, our resources, we then connect ourselves with all the good, all the hope that's going on in the world. And that's really powerful. And every one of us can do that in some way. So I feel like I have absolutely gone a long way around your question, but that's where I ended.